years in France, we had a very ambiguous relationship with the Communist Party. We are one of the last countries in Europe to have kept a Communist Party, let's face it, which was the antenna of Stalin. You know, there's no secret with that. But it was a soft sort of, it was sold as a soft communism. It was sold as some sort of humanism, you know, and somehow socialism in the French way. So diluted sort of communism without the whole atrocities, without, and basically with a lot of intellectuals saying, oh, you know, praising the USSR because they never went there. But like when you have intellectuals like Aragon actually going to the USSR in 1955, coming back as like this absolute dictatorship and disaster, and he's like, you know, he's not lying anymore. My point is, Russia, Soviet Union and Russia has been feeding this sort of idealized Russia to a lot of French people and to France, under the guise of, you know, Voltaire being friend with Catherine the Great, etc., etc. This sort of very artificial, at the end of the day, very artificial historical link between Russia and France, because I mean, except for a couple of intellectuals, France and Russia mostly fought each other. Like during, I mean, you have Napoleonic War, among others. So, I mean, Napoleon is still described as a small Hitler for Russians, you know, which we know for a fact that it's not the case, for he didn't commit genocide. So, anyways, my main point is that we in France have a distorted vision of Russia and Russian people and the so-called Russian soul. We have a distorted vision that has been sort of, given or sort of imposed over, indeed, Russian literature, etc., etc., or Russian ballet. But if you look closely at not Russian but Soviet literature, actually, was it really Russian? I mean, Gogol Russian. I have my doubts, to say the least. You know what I mean? And there is appropriation, and the problem is that because it's far, French people don't want to look further. They don't want to analyze further what's happening in Russia and what is really Russia, which is an empire. But that's my personal opinion here, I believe French people don't want to see it because France used to be an empire. And France doesn't want to see itself in the mirror. French people don't want to see themselves in the mirror and admit that, like, what Russia does today to Ukraine is what France did to Algeria, what France did to I mean, like the countless countries that it invaded and colonized in Africa, for example. So there goes my point, is like former empires have a hard time recognizing the imperial politics of an empire. And they have a hard time doing that. Why? Well, because then it's sort of, they will have to admit their own fault. And then it opens another question, which is the question of reparations. Why do, like, we have, if I'm not wrong, 400 billion, some 400 billion Russian assets frozen, yeah, in multiple Western countries. Why, we can genuinely ask ourselves this question: why haven't been these assets sold already and given to Ukraine already? Well, I believe the question is fairly simple. The answer is fairly simple. Is that because if let's say France or the UK or Germany does it, they will also have to do it with the countries they invaded before. There's also the question of reparations to Poland, between Poland and Germany. There's always there's a reparation of the UK towards Greece. There's a reparation or a lot of colonies, or India to that level. And this is, it's basically opening the Pandora's box, That's why also I do have my doubts that maybe that unless they can find some sort of thing where they absolve themselves to give their reparations and force Russia to do it, maybe it's going to be possible to get this. But that's where I'm going with this Russian culture thing, is that, again, Russia's right now behaving like as the last empire, hopefully the last. And I mean, I'm going to quote Timothy Snyder on that, who said it fairly well, is that, well, I mean, the only way, you know, empires dissolve is unfortunately through war. And World War I, World War II, that's, you know, the death of Western empires at the very least. So, yeah, I think it's a question of this perception is a question of history, and a history which is not well taught, or which is not taught, let's say, completely in France. And we also can also ask ourselves the questions why, and the question of the why also relies on France's infiltration by Russian services, which is massive at, you know, every level, especially when it comes to the military. You will see, it could be interesting if one day you see some discourse from generals and stuff like that. It's always, you know, NATO's fault. They always take the Kremlin's, they dilute it a little bit, not to shock people, but often, like, French generals or French military will say, oh, you know, it's NATO's fault, Ukraine is not a real country, etc., etc., etc. There's this massive widespread trend in France's military of sort of fascination for Russia, whether it is infiltration by Russian services or just a fascination for strong men, which is a thing among military. It's possible, but this attitude exists like a lot in France.